Hi, my name is Bhumika, and in this lesson, we are going to be studying about the central nervous system. And as a subtopic, we'll be dealing with the spinal cord. We've already done the brain, and the second sub part of the CNS is the spinal cord. So we're going to study a very introductory portion about it. Let's get started. We'll go over the facts once. I'll go over them very quickly. The spinal cord is a long, thin, tubular bundle of nervous tissue, and it supports the cells that extend from the medulla oblongata and the brainstem to the lumbar region of the vertebral column. So the medulla oblongata, it basically goes on and connects into the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord, they together make up the CNS. In the human, the spinal cord begins at the occipital bone, where it passes through the foramen magnum, and it meets and enters the spinal canal in the beginning of the cervical vertebrae. So that's the position where the spinal cord is located and where it begins from. The spinal cord extends down to between the first and the second lumbar vertebrae, where it ends. So the spinal cord is basically very shorter than the vertebral column. The enclosing bony vertebral column protects the relatively shorter spinal cord. The spinal cord functions primarily in the transmission of nerve signals from the motor cortex to the body, and from the afferent fibers of the sensory neurons to the sensory cortex. It also is a center for coordinating many reflexes and contains the reflex arcs. The reflex arcs, we're going to study about them later on as well, that can independently control reflexes without the help of the brain, and also central pattern generators. Alright, so what is the structure of the spinal cord? The spinal cord is the main pathway for information connecting the brain and the peripheral nervous system. Much shorter than its protecting spinal column, the human spinal cord originates from the brainstem. We already did this. The medulla oblongata, it continues to form the spinal cord. It passes through the foramen magnum and continues to the conus medullaris near the second lumbar vertebrae before terminating in a fibrous extension, which is known as the filum terminal. So that's the last portion of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is continuous with the caudal portion of the medulla and running from the base of the skull to the body's first lumbar vertebra. So this is where it ends, and it does not run to the full length of the vertebral column in adults, which is a very significant point. It is made of 31 segments, from which branches of one pair of sensory nerve roots and one pair of motor nerve roots arise. The nerve roots then merge into bilaterally symmetrical pairs of spinal nerves, and the peripheral nervous system is made up of these spinal roots, nerves, and ganglia. The dorsal roots are afferent fascicles receiving sensory information from the skin, muscles, and visceral organs, basically the external environment, to be relayed to the brain. The roots terminate in the dorsal root ganglia, which are composed of cell bodies of the corresponding neurons. The ventral roots, they consist of efferent fibers that arise from the motor neurons, whose cell bodies are found in the ventral gray horns of the spinal cord. The spinal cord are protected by 3 layers of tissue or membranes called the meninges that surround the canal. We've already done a gist of meninges in the brain as well. The dura mater is the outermost layer, and it forms a tough protective coating. Now I would want to make myself clear here. It's not dura mater as a lot of people call it. It's dura mater, and it's gray and the white matter. Matter means something that exists, that exists, and it has space. All right, and dura mater is just the name of the layer that covers it. All right, so there's a lot of difference. It's not dura mater, it's mater. Between the dura mater and the surrounding bone of the vertebrae is a space called the epidural space. The epidural space is filled with adipose tissue, and it contains a network of blood vessels. Then we have the arachnoid mater, or the arachnoid, which is the middle protective layer, and of course it gives a very spider web like appearance. The space between the arachnoid and the underlying pia mater is called the subarachnoid space, and the subarachnoid space contains the cerebrospinal fluid, which is of course present in the brain as well. It absorbs all the shocks that the brain or the spinal cord it may receive, and which can be sampled with a lumbar puncture or the spinal tap procedure. That's The delicate pia mater, which is the innermost protective layer, is tightly associated with the surface of the spinal cord. This cord is stabilized with the dura mater by connecting denticulate ligaments, which extend from the enveloping pia mater laterally between the dorsal and the ventral roots. The dural sac ends in a vertebral level of the second sacral vertebra. In cross section, the peripheral region of the cord contains neuronal white matters, tracts containing sensory and motor axons. Internal to this peripheral region is the grey matter, which contains the nerve cell bodies arranged in the 3 grey columns that give the region its butterfly shape. So, in the brain, we had studied that the grey matter, it is present outside, and the white matter, the bundle of axons and all of those, they are present inside. This is opposite to the presence of the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, as we can see, the white matter is outside and the grey matter is inside. This central region surrounds the central canal, which is an extension of the fourth ventricle and contains the cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal cord is elliptical in cross section, being compressed dorsolaterally. So it's pressed dorsolaterally, that means from front to back. 2 prominent grooves or sulci run along its length. The posterior median sulcus is the groove in the dorsal side, and the anterior median sulcus is the groove in the ventral side. So we have the diagram here. This is the dorsal horn right here, and then we have the dorsal root ganglion. Ganglion is of course a bundle of a number of sensory tissue. Then we have the lateral horn right here, and then we have the ventral horn, and this was the dorsal root, so this is the ventral root. And then we have the autonomic efferent nuclei at this side, and this is the visceral sensory nuclei. This is the somatic sensory nuclei. Here we have the afferent sensory information being passed, and then efferent signals to the muscles for produced response is passed from this side. Alright, so this is the spinal cord in the cross section, a much more of a simplified figure. We can see the dorsal root here, we have the dorsal root ganglion, and the ventral root, and the spinal nerve this way. So I hope I made myself clear in the structure of the spinal cord. If you have any problem, then you can ask me in the Q&A section. You can also comment, and please follow me, rate me, review me, and recommend this lesson. Thank you for watching.